There may be a few less Australians watching this video than usual because as of today, social media is banned for anyone in the country under the age of 16, and that includes YouTube, although YouTube Kids is still accessible, though that has a lot less content than main YouTube. But in any case, a few months ago, I posted a video called "The Internet is Being Age-Gated," where I was talking about, at that time, the upcoming AI verification system that YouTube was building out in order to use AI and other magical input signals to determine if a user is under the age of 18, and if so, enable or disable certain settings on their account. I'm not going to go into the specifics of YouTube's system because we already covered it in that video, but all that to say, this was being done as a response to policies being rolled out in various countries like the UK and Australia, which got a mention in that video because, among other things, it was interesting to learn that these age verification policies apparently don't have to go through parliamentary approval. They can be done outside of it. Now, I'm not an expert on Australia's legislative system, so I don't know if this social media ban has since gone through parliamentary approval. All I know is that now, as of today, there is a social media ban, which is probably the more important highlight. Now, if you're not from Australia and this is the first you're hearing about it, or you know what, maybe you are from Australia, you've always used a VPN, and this is the first you're hearing about it, and you go, yeah, I guess I'll keep using my VPN. But you may be wondering, what the heck is this? What sites are affected? How can this even be enforced on such a large scale? And to that last point, there's still probably a lot of questions up in the air about how it will be enforced, both from policymakers and the websites themselves, about how are they going to design these systems so that they work-ish. But in any case, this handy-dandy article from The Guardian at least lists the websites that are affected for now: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, Twitch, Kick, and Threads. A lot of websites that a lot of people, myself included, use on a very regular basis. YouTube, of course, being a pretty big one here because that's the platform that we're on. Now, I would say that certain of these platforms rank in different places along a scale of net positive to society to net negative to society, but they're all banned. So it doesn't really matter where the sites would fall on that scale anyway. Also, it mentions this is a dynamic list, unsurprisingly. So if everybody said, well, hey, they haven't figured out this site, it has all the functionality of TikTok, but it's not banned yet, so let's go here, it becomes popular, and then it's just going to also be added to the ban list. There is, however, actually a list of recognizable platforms that have been exempted, at least for now, from the ban. We've got Roblox, Pinterest, YouTube Kids, Discord, WhatsApp, Lemon8, I have no idea what that is, GitHub, Lego Play, Steam, Google Classroom, Messenger, and LinkedIn. And the interesting thing here is, especially with something like Discord, I would argue it's way easier to get into a server with people talking about really terrible, inappropriate things than it would be to get into a similar place on YouTube. And maybe I should just stop, because it's not going to be that YouTube gets unbanned, it's going to be that Discord ends up banned alongside YouTube. So, you know what, dear Mr. Prime Minister of Australia, you don't need to watch my videos. Nothing interesting here at all. I speak to the Prime Minister because he sounds pretty gung-ho about this whole thing, saying that now would be a great time to start a new sport, a new instrument, or read a book. Which, like, those are great things. If you want to play a sport or an instrument or read a book, you should absolutely do them. I'm just not sure that it's going to be, well, hey, social media is banned, so now everybody is going to immediately just go and do all those things. Social media was the only thing that was holding them back. And look, before I get too much further, let me step back and address the elephant in the room, which is that I obviously have some bias on this topic. This is what I've done for the last 15 plus years, is upload content to platforms that are now supposed to be inaccessible to anyone in Australia under the age of 16. And is there selfishly some concern of contagion that other countries see this and say, hey, this looks like it's actually possible from a technical standpoint, so let's try to follow suit? Absolutely. Although I will say, maybe in my case specifically, because I've been doing this for so long, the overwhelming majority of people watching are over the age of 16, so it might be of minimal consequence here. But there are many people for whom it would be a dramatic impact on their audience to their content, and they're not posting anything that is terribly objectionable. They're just going to be caught as collateral damage. However, I do know that two things can be true at the same time, and while there is a ton of helpful, constructive content that exists out there, I know that social media also has a ton of really bad, destructive stuff that you can stumble across that will especially affect someone who is younger. And look, I think that even the rise of TikTok and short-form content as a whole has been really negative on people's attention spans, which I think is bad for real world interactions amongst humans. And honestly, I look back at my own childhood and I'm very happy that social media did not exist in any form really until high school. And even then it wasn't terribly widespread because look, as soon as social media started to take a bigger role in my life, I dropped out of school. I think it was a constructive way to go in this case, but I did drop out of school because of social media. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And look, while I have some fears about contagion for this sort of policy spreading to other countries, is it necessarily fair for me across an ocean from Australia to be judging what they should and should not do for policy if an overwhelming majority of their citizens support it? Maybe not. There was supposedly a survey done last year, and 77% of Australians surveyed supported the idea of a social media ban. Apparently, parents and children included. I'm just envisioning a call. The surveyor is talking to a parent saying, hey, do you think you could ask your kid what they think about this prospective social media ban? The parent goes, yes, I just talked to my child who was watching YouTube on their iPad. They told me that this video they were watching is a detriment to their future success, and they do think that this should be taken away from them. So yes, my child definitely supports this. So I don't know about the child aspect of that, but again, who am I to question the survey? I don't know enough about it. But the thing is, and this is going to be people commenting saying, whoa, Jardon, getting a little political, are we now? I think a lot of politicians are interested in really sweet, short headline victories. Hey, I campaigned on this thing. Look, I did the thing. Look at all the headlines. Isn't this great PR? You should reelect me. On to the next thing. And you probably at the same time have a lot of parents who see, hey, my kid spends way too much time on their phone, on their iPad, and it would be great if there was a way to get this cut down a little bit. So yeah, sure, social media ban. Why not? It'll make them go outside more, won't it? And so you get these two forces coming together without too much evaluation of like, okay, how will this realistically be enforced? What are the second and third order impacts? Is it actually going to be a net positive long term? And if it is, then great. But I think there are also a lot of negative things that can arise from what is an attempt to do a blanket social media ban beyond, is it even possible to actually do it? So on one end, the ideal utopian end of the range of possible outcomes, we have what the Prime Minister said. Maybe every single kid who was previously browsing social media now goes outside, learns a sport, learns an instrument, or stays inside and reads a book. And it's constructive all the way around. Is it likely that's going to be the case for every single kid under the age of 16? Probably not. On the other end of that spectrum, what could happen is that as these kids are forced off of social media sites, they gravitate towards smaller sites that aren't on these ban lists that have arguably far worse content moderation than the big platforms, because the big platforms have had to develop algorithms in order to sort through what is supposed to be the most objectionable, the worst of the worst. And so they're going to be put onto these platforms that have zero moderation, could arguably be shown even more extreme content in a smaller echo chamber, and it actually becomes worse for everyone. Is that likely to be the case for every single kid? Probably not. The reality is going to lie somewhere in the middle of those two outcomes. Even that, though, is a very simplified spectrum of outcomes because it assumes the ban can't be circumvented, when obviously, if you hop on a VPN, you will be able to access those sites unless this becomes a unified global policy across every single country, which is also pretty unlikely to have happen. But even with a VPN, if a company just decides to change its policy on their own website level, then you can't get around it at all. Just like YouTube's AI age verification was a response to actions in only a few countries, but is now just a worldwide policy for everyone. But pushing aside the VPN and the contagion stuff for now, let's just focus on the situation for people in Australia confronting the ban head on. One of the concerns I have is it seems like in reading all this, the objective is just to not allow people under the age of 16 on social media. And nothing that I see here seems to give a carve out to parents saying, I'm totally fine with my kid being on social media. So is it possible that if you have a kid watching and the algorithm says, hey, based on your activities, you definitely seem to be under the age of 16. Well, can you submit an ID of a parent that is okay with this in order to get around it? Or will it say, well, this doesn't track. This doesn't look like the person who's on the account. And maybe in some cases, there'd be no way to know that for sure. But what if you have a more extreme scenario where it's a parent who's very, very excited that their kid under the age of 16 is making content on their own account, actually earning revenue. They have a lot of viewers. Well, can their parents say, yes, this is totally fine? Or will the platform say, hey, you, the uploader and all these videos are very clearly under the age of 16, so we can't have you on here. And even if you submit another ID, like clearly you are the person on this account because you're in the videos. So will there be a carve out for that? I hope so. I just don't see it being discussed anywhere. And I don't know if the platforms themselves are going to say, we don't want to deal with the possible repercussions. We don't want the liability. We just have to play it safe and you're gone. Sorry, no matter how much your parent might be okay with it. And I think that if a parent is okay with their kid browsing social media, that should be above the government saying no. The parent should have the final discretion there because this is ultimately a decision between them and their kid. So I hope I'm wrong and that a parent submitting their ID, which is obviously annoying itself, but I hope that will circumvent the ban, no questions asked. But at the same time, if I'm one of these platforms and I know I'm on the hook for major fines, if I don't delete an account that I know belongs to someone under the age of 16, am I going to take the risk that that kid went into their parents' wallet, grabbed the ID and submitted it? I don't know how that's going to play out. Are they just going to say, you know what, the algorithm is what it is. We can't take the risk. So if I'm a parent in Australia of a kid who's a content creator and I approve of what they're doing, is it worth accessing any of their accounts not through a VPN until there is a statement from the government addressing this specific issue? Like it's a definite risk and something to keep in mind. Hopefully it's been addressed, but we'll see. Because from all the articles that I'm reading, it really sounds like the intent is not parental approval. It's just don't be on social media. And in watching through this video here, made by an Australian, it doesn't give me a great deal of confidence about the possibility of a parental carve-out.
What about old mum and dad? Will parents be punished if they help their kids sign up for an account? Also no, and it won't be against the law for parents to share a login with their kid either. However, companies like Meta have said that they'll be judging how old you are partly through your account activity. So if your grown-up account starts going a bit too hard on the skibbity sevens, it could be flagged for removal anyway.
That doesn't sound too great. If I'm a parent and I don't want to potentially lose my own account, am I going to take that risk and let my kid share it? So again, it just sounds like the goal is to not allow any kid under 16 on social media, regardless of what the parent would prefer. And I disagree with that. If I was a parent, I would like to have the final say in something like that. Anyway, as far as what happens if your account is flagged for being underage and there is no way to circumvent it, it sounds like most of the platforms are treating it similarly. They'll give you the option to put your account on hold so that when you are 16, it will reappear kind of in the same state that it was, and also give the option to download the content that you've posted so far. That goes for Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and YouTube. All are stated here, but I assume even the ones that haven't been listed will probably treat it pretty similarly. Of course, though, if you are a creator, that could be a very detrimental downtime to not be able to access your account. I did want to speak a little bit more about this as it pertains specifically to YouTube. Some of the things I'll say here do apply to other platforms, but obviously YouTube has been my biggest platform over the years. And while there is bias here, I do genuinely believe that YouTube as a platform is a net benefit to society. There is a lot of educational content that helps people to learn new skills. Not all of that is available on YouTube Kids. Unfortunately, YouTube Kids really doesn't monetize, and so there isn't much incentive for people to gear their content towards YouTube Kids. So a lot of that is on main YouTube and won't be able to be accessed by people impacted by this ban. So you could have a scenario where perhaps someone is genuinely interested in learning, I don't know, a math formula, how to solve their math homework. And there is a great video out there that could really help them. And they actually want to watch that and they won't be able to. So instead, they go to ChatGPT and say, hey, ChatGPT, can you just solve my homework for me? So you could have people who are genuinely interested in learning, and they won't be able to do that. Now, yes, you can argue, well, that information probably exists in in other places that can be found. But A, is it necessarily going to be as engaging as a specific person who's really good at instructing in a particular way in a video on YouTube versus reading a description on another site, maybe from a textbook? Or is that person more likely to say, well, I tried, I'm just going to let ChatGPT do it? So I think you run the risk of people who are genuinely interested in topics losing access to being able to learn more about them. And that, I think, is a really big net negative. Is that worth the benefit of some people not being able to access content that is obviously harmful? I don't know. I do think YouTube does, for the most part, do a pretty good job at, in many cases, over-policing what is on the sites. I've had videos of mine that I think are perfectly suitable for anyone. They get flagged as, hey, advertisers aren't going to like this. Or in cases before, I've had 18 plus flags on videos that seem completely absurd. So I think in many cases, YouTube's moderation is very, very heavy-handed. And you have to be pretty careful in your videos if you want to maintain always having the green advertising monetized dollar symbol. They've gotten more and more strict over the years. And so ultimately, the places that a lot of people will go as an alternative are going to have less moderation. You're not going to have nearly as useful a content to discover. And I do think that is an overall negative to many people. Again, there is bad stuff out there, but it's always just weighing the pros and the cons. And I think especially in the case of something like YouTube, the things that you can learn, the content that you can find on there, it should be accessible over just filtering out that subset of bad stuff that does exist, because I think the goods outweigh the bads, at least in the case of YouTube. And you may well disagree with me, and you have every right to do so, because I know that there is stuff out there that is harmful that people can discover, and you may say, you know what, I'd rather not have that ever be a possibility than to allow someone who is actually interested in learning be able to discover that good stuff, because it may lead them to the bad. And you know what, if you're a parent, you have every right to feel that way. It's just a disagreement that we're going to have on that point. So I think it's just not good when it comes to YouTube specifically. You could make other cost-benefit arguments about other platforms. There are other platforms that I won't name them all by name, but that I think are net negatives to society, and I would feel less passionate there. However, I think there is arguably some good stuff to be found on most platforms. It's, again, as everything is, just a spectrum. Nothing is absolute. So obviously, I am biased. I disagree with this sort of policy. But if the overwhelming populace supports it, then, who am I to dictate what should or should not be done elsewhere? And anyway, that's the Australian social media ban for anyone out there who's in Australia. If you are a creator who is under the age of 16 with parental approval, I do hope that something gets figured out and it's not as bad as I envision it could be. That would be my biggest concern. But again, losing access to good educational content seems very negative. And but hopefully it won't end up being as detrimental as I think it could be. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.